Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for coming today to reflect with me on the topic of change, which is, when you break it down elementally, one of three things. It's either progress, like moving forward, or regress, moving backwards, or equilibrium, right, which is no change at all, and for the most part doesn't really exist anywhere in the world, in nature, or anywhere else. So even progress and regress are kind of subjective terms. They're really not that useful because they're too subjective. In other words, you have to almost pick a side right before you can decide what progress is or what regress is. So a couple of examples, for instance, a fungus would make progress, right, when it thrives, but the air quality in your home declines, right? The last Bush administration, by some measures, the most successful in post-war history, by other measures, the most disastrous, right? And then there's also, for a while there, we couldn't have enough automobiles and highways and things like that to express our uniqueness, our individuality through chrome and fins and all that kind of stuff. But as we're seeing a planet who's slowly losing its ability to support life, that suddenly doesn't look like the same kind of progress we thought it was. So if those terms, progress and regress, are impervious to objectivity, then we need to pick a side before we can say anything about change at all, really, besides the often observed observation that it's the only thing that's constant, right, change. Well, I'm here today because the little company I'm part of, we have picked a side in what we do. In fact, we all, and by that I mean people, all people, we've all picked a side in the sense that every day, all the things we choose to do or not do is related to our sense of what progress is, because only the most self-destructive of us doesn't seek some progress in their personal lives, their professional lives, societies that they belong to. So I'm not talking even about just the social issues that we may or may not participate in, that we work for or don't work for, right? I'm talking about pretty much everything that we do. In the context I want to select out of all those thousands of decisions we might make every day is that of our business, Grain Surfboards, in the hopes that it can help me talk about changes in the way corporations have in the past and may in the future relate to this notion of progress, and how small businesses like ours can maybe play a role in that, and by extension, individuals that connect with our company, our employees and customers and whatnot. So this little collection of thoughts is called Small Spheres of Influence, or Humanizing the Corporate Person. If you're not familiar with that term, we'll talk about it a little bit. So I know you might be thinking that there's few things that people could be involved in that are less about the, more about the self than surfing, right? It's just a purely self-enjoying kind of activity, and what can surfers possibly have to say about this idea of global change? But I'll tell you a little bit about the company first, so sit tight and hopefully tell you about us and then try to relate that to this idea. So you'll need to know a little bit about Grain first. We're about 10 years old. We have about 8 people working full and part-time. We're an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and we're closely held. We're managed by myself and my partner, Mike. That's him right there. And that's him right there. Hi, Mike. We build wood surfboards, all kinds, all sizes. We make skateboards, hand planes, all kinds of stuff that lets us use pretty much every bit of scrap that we produce. Well, not every bit, but almost every bit. And here's the thing. The boards are just beautiful. They're gorgeous to be around, to touch, and they're honey-colored and sleek and smooth, and they look like they drip right out of a faucet. They're wood, so they're attractive to carbon-based life forms like ourselves, and in the way that plastic and toxic foams just can't be. That people just connect with them automatically almost. It really pleases us to say that the people that have these things, they love them. They love them in ways that most people don't really connect with their material goods. It's really gratifying. Our shop is on a farm, which is not only pleasant, but it also gives us endless opportunities to put our products in juxtaposition with the place that they're built, evoking in a very natural way the values that Grain's built upon. Plus, everything looks good, no matter where you put it in there. It's you almost can't make a bad choice. Yeah, that's one of our products in an actual pigsty with the butts of pigs facing the camera. Still, not bad, not a bad photo, yeah? Our boards are built, and they're built hollow, so the whole process of building them is kind of a really engaging, pleasant activity of fitting and assembly and shaving and shaping and things like that. It's very, very like building a boat, and people respond to it a lot. So the products are attractive to people, but the process itself is attractive to people as well, which is what inspired us to start making them as kits and to have classes. People come from all over the world. This guy's from Norway, that guy's from Philly. To do this, and the classes have like a sort of a festive atmosphere, and as a result of that, we started thinking about having a festival. We have a festival every year. 500 or 600 people show up. They watch films. They look at art. That's a big giant steel wave. Listen to music. These guys are playing the soundtrack to a film they made, and learn. They learn stuff about building surfboards and things that might be related. There's a lot of kookiness that goes on as well, and it's kind of related to our place. Is kind of got its own quirkiness, I guess, and fun's pretty much always like kind of on tap. It's like you just break out anytime. It's really cool place to work, which is lucky for us because that's helped us to attract really, really great people and volunteers even, and people come there to work. And nobody ever leaves. Everybody just stays there and stays there and stays there. But despite all this kind of feel-good, creativity and love and all that stuff, we're still a business. So we've been busy developing proprietary technology and designing and building custom machinery, poring over financials, putting out fires, all that hard work, it takes to run a business. But, it's a bit like they say about ducks, everybody looks calm and looks lovely on top. It's a lot of paddling going on underneath, and that's us for sure. So, surfboards, right, that's great, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about change, and because we're a corporation, we do business around the world. I thought we'd talk about change as it relates to corporations. And I'm fond of saying that nothing drives global change and impacts to our societies and to our personal lives like the existence and activities of corporations. So I think this is worth looking at. No slides for a little while. I'm just going to kind of wander around here, this stuff. But like everyone, we can't get through almost any part of any day without coming into contact with all kinds of other corporations, many of them much larger corporations, global corporations that have been acquired by or are acquiring other corporations, getting larger and larger and larger. And this has been an unprecedented accumulation of wealth, asset wealth, and earning power and political influence as well. So in the process, they've erected pretty enormous and far-reaching resource exploitation and market manipulation machinery, right? We naturally reap the benefits from that, all of us as consumers, and car I drove here today, obviously, the wires that bring our electricity and our internet and all that stuff. And that's all good. We all see the benefit of that. But we paid a lot more for those benefits in society than just the cost of those goods, right? Unless you're a denier, you're probably fully aware that we're creating a debt that the future generations are going to have difficulty paying, in environmental degradation and in the cost of the impacts that activity has generated over the years. And you could think about it as just, human nature and part of the frailties of humanity, or it's the government's fault. Government's us, right, in a democracy. That's the idea. Or, whatever you might want to point to in order to justify it and say that it's inevitable that it all happened this way and that it's all that's possible, ever could be possible and will be possible. But I want to be a little more like, actiony about it myself, because I want to feel not quite so sidelined and out of it. I want to feel like I can participate in that future a little bit in some positive way. Because when we're honest with ourselves about it, when we think about the decline of nearly all the planet's ecosystems that can support life, there's no way to see the impacts of industrial free marketism as anything other than a single largest failure in the history of humanity. So that seems to indicate that it's something that needs to be dealt with, and I look for some way to participate in that. I want to also say that I'm going to talk about this stuff, and you're going to hear me say things like I just said. That have to do with my personal reflections on this, things I've learned from reading and research and films and news and things like that. Part of what I want to talk about is how an individual can take those values that they have and have them reflected in their interaction in the commercial world, in their relationship to corporations and whatnot. So listen for those pronouns I and we, because when I say I, I'm talking about myself. And when I say we, I'm talking about green surfboards. We have some values that we'll talk about, as well as the values that I hold personally. Now, most people know that corporations are chartered by the state, and that's because early in American history, corporations were formed with the people's permission. Each one had a specific purpose, like building a road or a bridge or something. When the corporation's job was completed, capital expended, the books were closed, and the state dissolved the corporation entirely. It was that one purpose that they were there for. Corporations were permitted to exist on the presumption that they provided a specific benefit to the general public. And it's regarded similarly to the way we think of nonprofits today, right, which are also chartered by the state, but still chartered based on their public benefit alone. That's the only way they qualify as a nonprofit. In those days, though, there was a similar standard for for-profit corporations. Their corporate charters would have described their proposed benefits explicitly, and when the benefit had been delivered, the public saw no reason sufficient to allow the corporation to continue existing. So that's all before industrial age capitalism came on the scene, but as infrastructure got more complex, warfare got more sophisticated, progress, right? Railroad barons and other industrialists found that they found amazing new tools for sucking out of the planet the natural resource heritage that belonged to the future as much as it belonged to anybody else. Along with the planet's resource wealth, they began sucking out wealth out of national treasuries in the form of subsidies, land grants, contracts, and things like that, with the full awareness that power could help them to exploit and manipulate those assets as they drew them away from the public common. They used wealth to gain power, and power to gain wealth in a socially unjust cycle that spiraled up and up and up to the present day. So things really accelerated when these industrialists won the absurd argument that corporations are due the rights of individual natural people, and that the persons referred to in the Bill of Rights was meant to include each individual corporation. But they argued that they weren't subject to the obligations and responsibilities of individuals to society, and they won that argument. So that was the birth of the oxymoronic corporate personhood, which is probably the most powerful and lopsided Orwellian doublespeak of all time, and has had the most far-reaching impacts. Overnight, it bestowed on these corporations the rights of a human, though with no obligation to care about or participate in the society that supports it. The single semantic power plant has been the most effective tool for allowing corporations from then to now to act, I have to say, like inhumanely, using the leverage of growing wealth and power. Now, I know that sounds hyperbolic, and intelligent, reasonable people can differ on that. I realize that. I don't want to dwell on it too long so early in the day, but in support of that, I would say just the following. These are my personal feelings. I find gross wealth disparity that makes people suffer inhumane. I find manipulation of markets and the intentional cyclical spawning of unstable bubble economies that destroy people's lives, the privatization of the common, even as the public whose common has been taken has to bail out those who took it. I find all that stuff inhumane. Emerging markets and disaster capitalism allow people to suffer in the streets while private sector contracts for their rescue can be negotiated. War profiteering, all those things, myself, I find them inhumane. That's just me. I find those things inhumane and insupportable. So anyone can disagree with that generalization. I realize that's a sweeping generalization as well, but there's no disputing a few simple truths. And one of those important ones is that by law, corporations have only one overarching responsibility, and that's to profit. That's by law. It's a legal obligation that they have. They maximize profit in large part by externalizing costs, which means getting the public, usually unwary or unwilling to deal with or look at it, to pay trillions for infrastructure, degradation of the environment, bailouts, all kinds of stuff. And those costs pile up, and they've externalized those. In other words, they don't have to charge us for them when they charge us for the products. We pay for them later, and without really agreeing to it. That puts us, the public, in a very absurd circumstance, right, where our state agencies are chartering them, permitting them to, and also the enabling policies of federal agencies. We permit them, we invite them, and don't forget, by legal interpretation, without moral obligation of any kind, to exploit us and our environment. And we pay them, people pay them for that pleasure. On top of that, through our taxes and degraded environment, many generations will come to pay for these future impacts. And the fiction that wealth and prosperity being generated today is worth it makes we the people into the principal enablers of a pretty twisted system that leads to our own destruction and outsourcing our management of our decline to unaccountable entities. And decline is regression. That's going backwards by any measure. The good news is it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, there's a growing segment of corporations thinking differently about their place in the world. This guy here, he looks like a typical corporate tool. But he's not. Let me back up a second. I need to say that one of my that I'm a sucker for stories of personal transformation. I find that capacity to change that we have as people to change one of the most moving features of the human condition. This guy is Ray Anderson. He was the CEO of a giant multinational flooring corporation. One day he was simply challenged to think about his role in all of this. So he's a CEO, global corporation, huge, and this led him to read a few books. He started reflecting on his relationship to the things I'm talking about. And when he looked closely at the methods and actions of corporations like the one he's in charge of, when he thought about what they were doing to the planet, he had this to say.
It's the wrong thing to do.
That's right, Ray. It's the wrong thing to do. So, so that corporation, yeah, I love his soft. That corporation's now on track to become 100% sustainable by 2020. They've been working at it since 1993 because of him. That means zero impact to the planet, zero. And this is called Mission Zero. The company's called Interface Flooring. I think Interfloor with no E on no double O on the end. You can look them up. I urge you to, because it's really fascinating to hear him. He died recently, but it's really fascinating to hear him talk about this process that he went through. Now, as we know, as a corporate CEO, he's got legally enforceable responsibilities to make profits. So if profits went down, Ray could have been charged with violating his fiduciary duty of care, and his fiduciary duty of loyalty, not despite his best intentions, but because of his best intentions, because of his moving personal transformation and his own quest to do the right thing. Mission Zero, since they've started that, the profits have been going up pretty dramatically. So luckily he's in the clear, or was when he died. So we have to also take a moment here, because I don't want people to think I'm a zealot. All of us that work for corporations are, like Ray, actual people. And if you believe, as I do, that people are generally good and want to be better, that's great news, right? We have families, we have kids, we know what we care about, in contrast maybe to what we may be propagating by being part of machines that lack any meaningful social ethos. As real people, that beautiful infinite capacity that Ray shows us, that capacity for personal transformation that I find so inspiring, is one of the best things we have going for us. Ray is a perfect exemplar of this, and the fact that he's not only that his is not the only corporation that balances discerning targets with meaningful good citizenship makes me feel a little better than I might otherwise, a little more optimistic. The other good news is that there's a thing called benefit corporations now. It's 30 states have passed laws that allow benefit corporations. They're also called B Corps. And what that means is those corporations that get that status have now the legal authority as a for-profit corporation to add benefits to society and benefits to the environment to their bottom lines. So they're no longer held to that strict standard of profiting. That's simple to say, like it seems like an easy thing to do, and why wouldn't you grant that? Why wouldn't all corporations have that already? But they haven't, and that hasn't been their responsibility, and they haven't seen it that way, and the courts haven't either. And if it weren't for the titanic global damage that the profit mandate, that requirement, coupled with corporate personhood, that ability to be a person and yet not be responsible as a person, if it wasn't for that marriage of those two things, none of this would be happening. So the other part of this, the corporate personhood, that'll take a constitutional amendment, literally, because the Supreme Court's weighed in on it increasingly. You remember Citizens United and the cases of all kind of campaign finance reform. Those things are all thrown out because of corporations' right to free speech as a person. So that's Ray. He's great. But back to grain. with a full recognition that we're really a tiny slice of a relatively small industry, that we're not on our own any sort of powerhouse of change, and that our lofty thoughts as individuals and as a company are unlikely to move any needle, any distance on these questions of the future of the world. I'd still like to tell you a little bit about how we've kind of gone about and approached our business. The most important characteristic of our enterprise is that we built it on a foundation of a set of values that are important to us. Because we're owned by a small group of people that agree on the importance of these values, profits have never been our highest priority. In fact, in early days, we'd get interviewed, and Mike and I would be asked where we saw ourselves in 5 years. And of course, they were interested in like what we thought our earning targets were going to be and our asset wealth and all that other stuff. And we really had no good answer to that. We just don't think of our experience in those terms at all. It just stymied us. We simply built the business to support a lifestyle that we wanted. All the possible answers that we could come up with were related to quality of life, and our daily engagement was something that feels inherently, good. So the most we could say was that we wanted the company to have enough financial stability that we could provide the best possible place for our people to work in, stable employment they could all rely on, all the benefits we could afford, and the ability to pursue our business consistent with the values that we built it on. That's all we really want to do. Two of those values have always been related to sustainability and community. Largely because of our earnest and genuine dedication to these goals, we've become noticed and known a little bit. And the happy result is that we're regularly afforded the opportunities to partner with much larger corporations that know the value of a dedicated community of customers like ours. They see we have it, and they don't really generate that with their motive of just making more all the time. So that gives us an opportunity to model for them the value of pursuing and building a values-based business like ours. We get to engage them in small ways, dialogue about our values, and give them some real-world experience of engaging with an audience that's dedicated community of sustainability advocates. That's our customers. And the tens of thousands of people we communicate with through social media and in our workshops and who know our products have all heard our message and see us as an example of the way business can be pursued. Many of them are people my age who grew up through some of the most rapid rises of corporate power in history. We were conditioned to the religion of American exceptionalism. We were taught that capitalism is practically a form of governance, that it's a foregone conclusion and necessary for our government to work. That global export of our system is good for everybody. That's widely disagreed with around the world. And that the American dream is really just an honor to struggle for, and we are all struggling more than we used to. I think probably everybody would agree with that. So we get the singular privilege of modeling another way, and we gingerly offer an example of valid alternatives to people who may be ready to adjust the way they might think about business and success. Some of our values are related to a notion we call re-evolution. That's the idea that there are things of value in the past, good things that were common before progress changed them into something else. Under this idea, and as we've done with our surfboards, we advocate reaching back into the past to find things of quality that inspire us, and then we re-evolve them using new thinking. The notion that progress could come from looking backwards at first glance seems kind of ridiculous, I get that. But I leave you with this thought. If you spin back the time before the railroad barons and industrialism and all that stuff in this country, what we had was families working on farms, and they worked together, the families together on farms. And the farms were part of communities of other farms. And they lent equipment and labor and draft animals to each other for harvesting, plowing, planting. Each was decidedly a commercial business, right? There's no farm that wants to lose money or is doing it just for the good of the planet, right? They were decidedly a commercial enterprise, but the values that they were operating on had to do with family and community. So I'm not advocating a return to an agrarian society, obviously. I'm inviting you to think what it would be like to reach back into the past, find that thing of value, and imagine a society that adopted that kind of thinking related to community, family, connectivity, interdependence, instead of simply the profit motive. And what change would it take to resurrect that mentality, to re-evolve a society, to leave behind sort of the most venal side of ourselves that's encouraged only by pursuit of profit, and reject that predatory, hyper-competitive worldview that leaves few victors and many vanquished? Why wouldn't we choose change? Why wouldn't we choose change to a society that nurtures that which is best in us instead of breeding kind of the worst? So regardless of the effectiveness of our tiny effort along these lines, we still couldn't feel better about what we built. You know, 1 minute we didn't exist, and here I am 10 years later, get an opportunity to talk to you about this. We also get to believe that we're proving out a small model of something better, and that's a change that in this small sphere of the community that's been drawn to us is received with gratifying enthusiasm. So this is personal, which is to say we each make choices about how we think and act, and millions of actual people, making a few significant changes in our way of thinking about our relationship to commerce, government, and each other incubates an insidiously infectious collective of change that can infiltrate, and we can hope erode an edifice of maybe systematic inhumanity, if we want to characterize it that way, that we mistakenly erected. What changes can we make? We can think about our values. We can look for opportunities to act on them. We can see if there are ways to inject those values into the corporations that we come in contact with. We can share those choices with people who are interested. We can challenge the way we've been conditioned to think about wealth and property in the pursuit of more. We can reduce the influence of wealth on our elected representatives by advocating for a repeal of that idea of corporate personhood. That's a constitutional amendment. And we could some towns pass ordinances that reject it in their towns, and we could also, oppose like international trade agreements that basically trade off the people's democratic inheritance to the vagaries of the commercial world. We can't continue to think of corporations we work for and work with as pretend people that subsume our values as humans. There are opportunities for us to leverage our humanity and generate small spheres of influence that can enable us to generate thoughtful, positive change in a world that isn't working as it could and as it should. So at Grain, we're interested in nurturing our own small ecosystem of potential influencers. And anyone can be one just by joyfully taking the values that we real humans hold dear and injecting them directly into the businesses we create and participate in, the entities that increasingly own the future of our world. Enough of us take that on, and we can nudge everything towards the most important change of our lifetimes, and maybe that of future generations as well. Thanks.
So, given that you guys are LLC and what you said about LLP, I'm guessing the state of Maine is not.
The state of Maine has not passed a B Corp law yet. We can still get sort of a token badge as a B Corp through the sort of main agency or group of people that are promoting this idea of benefit corporations. But we're looking forward to that time when Maine changes its law, because that's us they're describing. And luckily we're held by a small group of people all agree, but ultimately, as that changes, or it might change in the future, we'd have different obligations. Did you have a question, Morgan?
Where do you get your wood?
We get our wood from Maine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from it's mostly cedar.
Cedar?
Yep, and it comes from a little family-owned mill. Are they still owned by a family? That guy bought it. Yeah, Jay, right? Jay, yeah. The last guy who owned it was this sweet old fella named Pat Lovely. Yeah. And Pat would drive down 5 hours from Portage with a truckload of lumber for us and charge us $50, go to the malls and go home. He was great, yeah. Yeah. We went up and visited his mill one time with a camera crew from Discovery Channel. Mm-hmm. And we weren't really prepared for what he's doing up there. His mill is got embossed date stamps of 1911, and is still running. The only modern thing in there is a laser that lets him see where the saw blade's going to cut. That's it.
So he builds your parts for you, and then you.
He doesn't. He just gives us rough wood. So it comes to us just green, and sometimes with snow and ice and on it, and it all goes into our shop. And we have a pretty sophisticated bunch of machinery. We design a lot of our own machinery because it's pretty specialized, and it goes through there, and when it comes out the other end, it's all the little parts and pieces that are necessary. I brought some little chunks of surfboard here so you can see a little bit how they're built. There's a lot of little bits and pieces to it, a lot of steps, but we've proven essentially that there's a lot to it, but no one step is very, very hard. And we've had 12-year-old kids build them, and we've had up to neurosurgeons literally build them.
What's the inside?
The frames are made out of marine plywood.
Okay, so it would be light.
Yeah, the whole idea, this construction method was developed by a guy from Wisconsin, weirdly, who he was like a lifeguard and then he became a sort of a paddleboard racer and moved to Hawaii. And when he was down there, he started fiddling around with taking these big, solid, heavy wood surfboards and just boring huge holes in them, and then covering them with little veneers of wood. And then he started winning all these paddle races, between the islands. And one of his friends said to him, "Geez, that's interesting what you're doing, Tom, but have you ever thought about," this guy was an aeronautic engineer, he said, "Do you ever think about building it like an airplane wing?" Yeah. And so he was the first guy to try to do this. And if you've ever been over to Flatbread and they had that big surfboard in that little private room they had in the front, it was a big kind of blocky looking thing. That's the exact same type of construction. They're just really square, slab-sided, devices. He was the first commercial surfboard builder in the country. And so we took that idea, reached back and found him and found what he was doing, and then we evolved it so we were able to build surfboards of all these super modern shapes, really complex contours in them and things like that, using the seed of his method and then just applying some new thinking, new materials. All our epoxies are organic epoxies, stuff like that. Yeah, sorry.
So, as you guys have evolved, and you have your core ideals and what you strive for and the type of corporation that you're building, as small as it is, have you ever come to points where you've been challenged by those core goals and words to live by and work by, because they are, for a lot of us who are small businesses, live by, work by, ideally are the same. But if you come to a point where those live by and work by words and, your mantra or whatever, has challenged your ability to make money.
Definitely.
Or has challenged your choice to say, all right, we're going to go against something right now because we've got to get some cash in, or no, we're not going to choose to do X because it's not right, but we're going to lose the potential for someone to take home some money at the end of the day. Sweeping question, but just
No,
in that
that's easy.
navigation of it.
Yes, all the
So
time.
how do you navigate that?
So-
You guys sit down and say, okay, is it simply a pro or con? Or you say, okay, well, I'm not going to retire at 60. Probably not
Well, we fight about it a little bit, don't we, Mike?
What's that?
We fight about it a little bit.
We do argue quite a bit.
We're lucky to have people who are super engaged at the upper levels of our company, super engaged in what we do. Everybody all the way down is really engaged in what we do. Our people are bringing us ideas for, wiser use of resources and ways to be more environmentally responsible all the time. It's just a daily conversation. We don't even really sell ourselves, if you will, as a kind of a green company because it's just inherent in what we do. It's built in. And we believe, part of our philosophy is it should be that way for everybody. This shouldn't be something special we talk about, that we're trying to do the best we can and be the best we can in that way. But probably a good way to answer your question is to look at this goal of sustainability. So, people want to think, yeah, we're a sustainable company. If you ever hear anybody say they're sustainable or they're green, they're lying, right? They're just a product positioning statement, because sustainability is a continuum. It's a goal. It's something you're moving towards. It's like you want to be perfect, right? Tell everybody, I want to be perfect. You're never going to say you're perfect. So that's constant. It's like a thing you work towards perfection. You want to be the best person you can. You want to be the most sustainable. You want to do the best you can and live within your values. I've got a lot of values. I try to hold myself to these standards. I fail all the time individually. You can't beat yourself up. I could live in a cave. I could not have a vehicle. I could not participate in society as we have it. I could do that, but I'm choosing to be part of society, and so I make compromises all the time. This is just realistic. You have to be that way. So yeah, we compromise our values, but we do it reluctantly, and we feel like our responsibility is to have thought about it and to fight about it a little bit, disagree, make it a little bit painful to compromise our values. And why don't we think that way as individuals? Why don't we think about those choices we make every day, is my own opinion, every day in that same way? Why aren't we challenging ourselves? Maybe I shouldn't. What the hell? That shouldn't be that easy. There should be a reason why you can justify it. So I'm a vegetarian for the most part, and somebody once saw me pull up on my motorcycle. I'm wearing my leather jacket, and they're like, "Hey, why are you wearing leather for you?" Right? So Fair point. I'm not a vegetarian for those reasons. I'm a vegetarian for other reasons, actually, socioeconomic kind of reasons. And but it's a fair point. But even if I was, I would have thought about owning a leather jacket. I would have looked into what the alternatives were. Is there safety gear I could wear that isn't full of, oil products, oil-based products, or blah blah blah? And I would take some measure of that before I made a decision to do it. That's what we do. We just take a measure of each one of these decisions as they come to challenge us. And honestly, we don't make as much money as we should or could. We don't. And that's a choice. We choose to have a company that's built this way instead. We choose to think about our goals for the future being more related to these goals and our employees and their lives and their ability to have the same thing we built the thing originally for, which is to build a great lifestyle for ourselves, a great place to go every day that we're excited about being part of. And we're all excited about it. We're all really proud. I'm sorry? Yeah. So we're 100% flex time in our shop, so there's no hours at all. People just have responsibilities. And every one of our employees is we tell them when we hire them, you're going to be the department head of your department and the department of one. So be innovative, be creative, change things, bring proposals, take charge of it, own it, and go surfing whenever you want. That should be built in, right? But just get your shit done. So that's how we want it. It's pretty sweet. Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
So speaking of that, what questions do you ask people when you're interviewing? How do you pick the right people for your team?
The last interview we did, I asked the guy, do you have any tattoos? Yeah. No, that's a joke. I really did ask him that, but I was just joking around with him. We, it's really the same kind of process. We have been, it's this weird kind of magic juju. I know that sounds kind of weird to say, but we will think like Mike and I will be talking. We really need to get somebody who can do this and this and this, and they should have this kind of, that kind of. And then literally within 2 or 3 weeks, somebody will walk in the door and say, hey, I'm looking for work. And we'll say, what do you do? And like, it's crazy, but it happens like that a lot. Like I told somebody not too long ago that our preference is to hire the first person we interview. Just like let that magic happen, kind of in a way. I was in Hawaii some years ago. We met a pro down there who was sidelined with an injury, and I was helping him to build a surfboard on the beach during this huge Triple Crown event, this world event in surfing, and we're getting close to the end of the thing, and I'm like trying to find a glass. I don't know anybody in Hawaii. I don't know, like we got to get a glass. We got to get this board glassed before we leave, because if we don't, it may not ever get done and all that stuff. And he keeps saying these things to me. He's going like, don't worry, man, the universe will provide. And I'm like, universe? I'm from New England, we plan shit out, So he's going on like this, and I'm convexing, and I'm worried about it. Just a couple of days are going by like this. I'm trying to get a hold of his glass, so I can't get a hold of him. And we're standing there at the beach, and I have this idle moment, unusually during this week, and I'm talking to Mike's brother Nick, who takes a lot of our photographs. Nick Levecki is very good. And I'm talking to Nick about it. He's like, you find a glass, we're talking, and then this little pudgy kid comes up and tugs on my sleeve and says, are you looking for this guy? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, he's right there. That's my dad. I'm like, what? The universe, So I don't know what any of that means. I don't know if there's anything to it, but we've been just really lucky, and it's been pretty easy. We've made one bad hire, and then we've had some rocky, times with employees. That happens, and usually things straighten themselves out, and everybody gets with the program. But generally, people are already come there so ready to be engaged in what we do, it starts becoming easy. That's not a great answer. I'm sorry. I know magic, right?
I run a small business too, and I think your story is really inspiring. And I know you said you have classes there, and I assume your classes for people who want to build surfboards. But I wonder if you could have a lot of influence if you had corporate retreats or workshops for people, business owners, big or small, who wanted to learn how to do something similar to what you're doing.
Yes.
Sort of infuse.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that, or is that something?
Not only have we thought about it, we've done a bunch of those just as kind of pilot projects with different companies that we kind of get close to through some sponsorship thing we might be working on, or because some companies, they'll send like a dozen of their people or half dozen of their people to our shop for the day just to hang out and check it out. Like design teams come there just to kind of get inspired, shoe companies and all kinds of all kinds of things like this. So we've had people do that, and it's a great opportunity to do exactly what you're saying. And that's what I was referring to specifically as one of my examples in my mind of how we interact with those corporations and are able to pass some of that along.
Really expand your sphere of influence.
Yeah. I mean, there's the opportunities really start to open up to do all that kind of stuff because we are lucky. What we have happens to be real, and we happen to really mean it and care about it. We're not greenwashing anything. We're not even really selling ourselves as a green company. This is all real. These people are creating product lines that are green product lines so that they can get that sector of the buying public, and that's all it is. So they want and need to start finding companies like us to gain inspiration from, and also to kind of like use as a sort of a brand buffer a little bit to that green audience. And there's a little bit of mercenary relationship there that is a little uncomfortable, but the great thing is that we get to do exactly what you're saying. We get a chance to interact with them and show them what this dedicated community of sustainability advocates looks like as customers.
Is that information on your website?
Not about team building things and stuff, but we do workshops and we set those up on a onesie twosie. But we're planning to develop some programming around that. It's just not fully developed yet.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll credit you too.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be a question hog, but I just found your speech very inspirational.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I just started a nonprofit in North Berwick, Maine to basically North Berwick, Lebanon, Berwick, there's a lot of poverty there. And she runs a program where she kind of helps kids that have shitty home lives. They're not learning disabled, they're not special education, they have horrible home lives. So she started this program. All these teachers would be like, that kids just don't waste your time with them. And she's like, let's see. And then she would really help them shine. So we found in that community, in our community, because there's poverty, there's also a lot of creativity. And these kids don't have an alternative. Never mind cable. Most of these kids a lot of kids do not have running water and electricity, let alone food. So we started a nonprofit called Continuum Art Collective, where what we're doing is we just got our federal approval last month.
Congratulations.
We have a ton of artist friends. We're assigning them students a mentor. Meet with a mentor, determine what their material needs are, determine what workshops we can help plug them into. But what I wanted to say was that one of our first opportunities to go present at a local festival seemed like a very great thing to do, you know. So taking our values, we're meeting with these people, we have the same values. Really, in the end, what we found was they were trying to use us to get a one-day liquor license.
Right.
So they came and presented their thing, and then they left. I said, hey, let's do a gut check here. And people were back and forth. They're like, oh, we could make a lot of money here. I'm like, what is our mission? So if you come up with a strong mission statement, and obviously you have like your own constitution that you operate with. It's very easy. The decisions are very easy. And I read the mission statement. I said, what the hell does this have to do with that?
Right. If I could draw a question out of what you're saying, I'll say that this kind of relates a bit to your question in the sense of how do you balance the different challenges of trying to run a business, because a nonprofit's still a business, you know, and all your grantors and funders are going to want you to show how you can sustain yourself through your own activity as time goes on. You got to make money. You got to do it. And so how do you balance that need to make some money for the benefit of the kids against some of the other challenges that you might come up with? And you might find that selling yourself for a one-day liquor license to a festival gets you the opportunity to access a certain donor base that you don't have already. And you can cultivate those relationships and cultivate this new donor base that wouldn't have been available to you. And it cost you, maybe, you know, you feel a little dishonorable about trading yourself that way. But if you know what your goals are, you're right, the decision starts to become easy.
It wasn't really even about the liquor or the license. I like drinking. They also wanted to use us as a fiduciary agent where these corporate sponsors would give us money and then we would turn around. It was money laundering for the most part.
Right.
And it just didn't And I talked to a friend of mine who was in a nonprofit for years, and basically said, you know, if it doesn't feel right, you don't start off operating this way. You guys are all good people, you're here to help these kids in the community. Don't start off, you know, making bad decisions.
Yeah, this kind of thing helps a lot. It for sure does. We point to this a lot to one another when we're having conversations about hard choices.